Nigeria is a great country. According to United Nations estimate, our population will rise to 411 million by 2050, making us the third most populous nation on earth, behind only China and India. Those were some of the words of President Muhammadu Buhari at the inauguration of his second term and the maiden national June 12 celebration. The population which the president speaks of in that speech live mostly in the 36 states that make up Nigeria, mostly because there is still the Federal Capital Territory, which is administered directly by the federal government. The 36 states are administered by state governors, elected to govern them every 4 years. Upon our return to democracy some 20 years ago, these governors established a peer review mechanism known as the Nigerian Governors Forum, which they hoped will help them reassert their state as viable and credible units within the context of the Nigerian Federation. We beam our searchlight tonight on that organization and its current chairman, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who is also the governor of Ekiti State. And welcome. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf, and you're watching Hard Copy coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Dr. Kayode Fayemi is my guest tonight, and you're welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you for having me, Maupe. Good to be back here.
It is indeed. It certainly wasn't a case of once bitten, twice shy for you.
I hope not.
You decided to bite the bullet again and throw your hat in the ring to be governor of Ekiti State. Why did you decide to make that decision, considering the fact that you seem to have been rejected the first time? Or when you tried for a second tenure?
Well, it was clear that I had unfinished business in Ekiti. There were initiatives, programs that I started as governor the first time that I felt I needed to consolidate on.
You weren't scared that you were going to be rejected the second time?
Because I knew I wasn't really rejected the first time. There were a combination of factors, which I'm sure many people were aware of, but we won't go into that. That's not why I'm here.
Now your colleagues have thrust some responsibility on you as chairman of Governors Forum. You asked for the responsibility, I believe. Did you?
Well, not quite.
You didn't?
We don't operate like that in the Governors Forum. I was elected by consensus.
In other words, you didn't even offer to say, gentlemen, I think I can do this.
We do not operate that way. The Governors Forum is a non-partisan body of peers. We're equals.
Indeed, it is. But even amongst equals, somebody must offer to say, I'd like to lead this group.
Well, I think it was the considered opinion of many of my colleagues that I was the most suitable to step into the shoes of the chairman of the Governors Forum. Let's
talk about the agenda, which is, I think, what a lot of people are very concerned about. The Nigeria Governors Forum has received a lot of bashing in the past. They've talked about how it's just a gentleman's club who seem to make quite a bit of noise, throw their weight around and things of the sort.
But unfairly, perhaps.
Perhaps unfairly, but not without reason in terms of what has been happening in the past. Let's focus on what you have now said you're going to do in tandem with other governors. You put security on the front burner. You have said it's the biggest item on your agenda, and you've gone ahead to have the National Economic Council create a committee for it. You did say that was going to happen. And you've asked citizens to hold governors accountable for the security in their state. You said that at the...
We're held accountable anyway. We're elected to guarantee the security and welfare of citizens.
Well, you understand the context in which you spoke of that, because many a times governors say, yes, indeed, we are CSOs of our state by name, but we do not have the apparatus to be able to operate as such. Now you say, hold us accountable, hold the governors of your state accountable. Are your governors with you? Are your fellow governors with you on that?
Apparently, because we're working with the federal government to address those knotty issues that act as impediments for governors driving the security and protection of life and property.
What are some of the impediments? What solutions are you coming up with the federal government, which you're going to see will make a difference?
Well, you know, you just talked about the National Economic Council meeting we held last week with the Vice President, and this was the only item on the agenda. And that council meeting reviewed on a state-by-state basis, listen to the National Security Advisor, listen to the Chief of Army Staff, listen to the Inspector General of Police, what they consider to be their challenges. Now the Inspector General of Police has come up with the idea of community policing, which takes security down to the local level. The question is, how effective is community policing without devolving security to the state and local levels? Those are the impediments. That's one impediment that we need to collectively address. All my colleagues, in one form or another, are funding security institutions. So apart from whatever the federal government is doing, my colleagues are buying vehicles.
But that's not new. They have been doing that before now.
Precisely.
What is new?
But what is coming on stream is, how best do we scale that up in order to ensure that the citizen feels a sense of safety and security? That's one. The other is what we're going to be doing in terms of the criminal justice system. We have a weak criminal justice system that has really given room for impunity. People don't get punished because they don't even get convicted. Look at the list of people awaiting trial in detention in Nigeria. They're in prison for allegation of committing a crime.
So those are the problems.
Those are the impediments.
Well,
the solutions. One is that we need to address the nature of governmental response to security itself. Security is not just the hardware. There is also the soft side, which is why for us in the Governors Forum, we'll be focusing a lot more on human security response. What are the issues around inequality, around joblessness, around poverty, and what is the nexus between poverty, security, development, and governance? Because those are things we must tackle. You just mentioned the population increase. Nigeria is going to be the third most populous country. What you didn't add is that 70% of that population is under 30. A very youthful population, but that is also idling and not having enough to do, either for reasons of underemployment or outright unemployment. So these are issues we must tackle long term. But in the immediate, we need to give our people a sense of security. And that's what that security committee that the National Economic Council has just inaugurated is saddled with. Incidentally, I chair that committee on behalf of the country. So when I say hold us partly accountable, we have to do that. Then there are issues of constitutional reform.
You said hold us accountable.
Yes.
Partly was not there.
No.
Hold us accountable is hold us accountable.
Well, because we're governors, we have responsibilities for safety, security, and welfare of our citizens.
So in the immediate, what are you proposing? Yes, this committee has been set up. It's definitely not going to be all about talk. What is it going to be doing?
It's not going to be about talk. This committee is not going to take over the responsibilities of the President and the Commander-in-Chief. This committee will recommend to the President and the Commander-in-Chief what we see as the way out of our current quagmire.
The President has been speaking a lot to state. We notice that trend now from his inaugural speech, and perhaps he was speaking to them in his first term, but one of the things he made sure to do was include them in his inaugural address. He said, a nationwide development cannot occur from Abuja alone. It must occur at state, and government cannot do it alone. I therefore implore all state governments, especially those with large rural economies, to aggressively solicit investment in your state, invest in developing human capital, reducing bureaucracy and corruption, hosting and attending investment summit and improving the ease of doing business. Now you're looking at reviving the SPRM. That's an
excellent part of the speech. I thought people had not even commended the president enough for not just that. There are many gems in that speech that
this is an address to the state.
And no, it's an address to the nation. This was the inaugural address.
My point is this is an address specifically.
And I'm saying it's commendable that the president is coming out front and center to recognize the critical importance of subnational governments in the overall developmental agenda.
Because states have not been pulling their weight as they ought to. Let's take the issue of bureaucracy and corruption. Looking at the SPRM mechanism, that's the state peer review mechanism which you have, what states would you be saying have done substantial work in that regard that other states can actually follow? Well,
you know, Markwe, whatever we do at the Governors Forum is not necessarily a bean counting exercise. We're not in the business of ranking states. This is state first, this is second. No. The whole purpose of the peer review mechanism is peer learning. What is Lagos doing well that Ekiti can learn from? What's Ekiti doing better than others that Ebonyi, Katsina can learn from? So it's to even strengthen cooperative federalism.
There's nothing wrong with ranking, is there? So, there's nothing wrong with ranking.
There's nothing wrong with ranking.
It's good for competition.
We don't have a problem with competitive federalism. The issue, however, is that for us, it's about peer learning. And when we started this, under the chairmanship of Governor Bukola Saraki, we had an independent steering committee. I happened to have been a governor then as well. And Ekiti was the first state to be peer-reviewed. In fact, to date, it's only Ekiti State that has been peer-reviewed. The Anambra review process started, but it was never really completed. Now, I have said in my inaugural speech as chairman of the Governors Forum that we're returning to peer review because I believe it would help us. Not just with doing better in our state on a variety of issues: economic development, revenue generation, education, healthcare, human capital, agric, you name it. We can learn lessons, and we are learning lessons unofficially.
But there is no state that you are mentioning to say this is the state we are going to copy in terms of, you know, being more efficient and reducing corruption.
No.
You can't hold any state up as a beacon for that.
Markwe, I'm the chairman of the Governors Forum. We have our internal mechanisms of talking to one another. We don't have to make it a public spectacle. That's why
But not one state. They're standing out in that regard.
Well, there are several states that are actually beacons in many regards.
But not that regard.
Even in that regard.
Can you give us one?
I don't want to go into that because, as I said to you, this is serious business. It's not finger pointing. It's not name calling. It's about ensuring that we bring everybody together. I mean, I spent the whole of yesterday with my colleagues talking to our development partners, from Gates Foundation to Gavi Alliance to the World Bank, and reviewing what is being done by all these development partners in our states.
Well, Dr. Fayemi, you have to admit that when the country is not doing well, what it means is that states are not doing as well as they ought to be doing.
Absolutely.
If we agree that we're at a point of crisis, it does mean that states haven't done as well as they ought to have done, and that's where we are where we are.
There's a lot of room for improvement. There's no question about that.
That's putting it very mildly.
There is a lot of room for improvement, and states are doing very well within a contextual experience. However, one of the points the president made, which we often do not pay attention to, is that development cannot just happen only from Abuja. It's a mind shift that we require. And it's that mind shift that we need others, all of our citizens, to understand.
Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Governor of Ekiti State and Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, is our guest tonight. Well, the Nigerian Governors Forum has not shied away from some of the debate which have raged on before now. Sovereign Wealth Fund was one of them. I think it came out from the excess crude account. There was a huge controversy over that. Minimum wage has always been a thorny issue. The federal government recently approved a new minimum wage, which states said they were not supposed to, but they're wondering how they were going to pay.
Absolutely.
Have they come up with a way to meet their commitments now?
Well, we're waiting for the template from the federal government. Minimum wage is not a state issue. It's a national issue. And the natural practice after it's been passed into law is that a template would come from the federal government that would be the basis of negotiations at the various state levels with our unions.
So as we speak, it hasn't exactly kicked into effect.
To the best of my knowledge, and I should know, there's been no template from the Federal Ministry of Labor and the tripartite National Wages Commission.
Is there an attempt to stall?
I don't believe it's an attempt to stall. I don't believe it's an attempt to stall. States are already putting their heads together with their unions to discuss this at the local level. But as I said, it's not a state-driven agenda. It's a national agenda.
Perhaps so, but I mean, it's something that states should be interested in.
We are very interested.
You are the governor of a state.
Yes,
we do know that there were issues in terms of salary payments in your state.
Yes, there was before my time.
How do you think that this increment is going to affect your state recurrent expenditure, for instance?
Oh, obviously, it's going to take its toll on the state's recurrent expenditure. We're going to have to look for more money. But it's always important to also state that a minimum wage increase is not a salary review. It doesn't necessarily affect everybody. It affects mostly those who are currently earning below the minimum wage, to bring them up to speed and to then make adjustments along the line. So I think it's important to make that point.
A minimum wage review is certainly a salary review, Your Excellency.
No. It's not a general salary review.
Perhaps not as much as those at the bottom, but it definitely calls into question, or definitely calls for a look into the general spectrum of salary earners, especially when you look at the vagaries of the economy.
You can look into the general spectrum, but the key point here is a minimum wage increase. It's not a general salary review.
Well, I think that will always be up for debate. But let's quickly talk about this one, subsidy removal.
Yeah.
Only recently, you heard the Emir of Kano, Emir Sanusi, who recently brought the issue to the fore. He said we were tethering on the brink of bankruptcy. I'm paraphrasing him. Those were not his words, but I know that bankruptcy was there somewhere. You're a politician, you know the considerations, but you also know that this is certainly not sustainable. How is the NGF approaching this, and how would you say that the federal government approached this?
Well, the federal government is already approaching this. I'm sure you heard the former finance minister, Zainab Ahmed, raised this in response to the IMF point about this at the spring meeting of the World Bank and IMF, that Nigeria is ready and willing to tackle the subsidy question, but the country also has to look at its implications for the lower end of the rung, if you like, the ordinary people in our country. And yes, we all know that there are those tiny elites feeding fat on the subsidy, and it's definitely the position of the Governors Forum that subsidy has to go, but subsidy cannot go overnight. It's something that you have to work on in order to ensure that other palliatives kick in order to manage that transition. So the question is that we need to address the way the NNPC functions. And it's not just about subsidy, it's about the overall transparency of the institution responsible for the golden egg in Nigeria.
I'm chuckling a little.
It's about the transparency.
I'm chuckling a little.
Yeah.
Because you have been in the federal government.
I was a minister in the federal government.
Yes.
And there's been a significant improvement. It was during my time that my colleague Ibe Kachiku started publishing a monthly record of the, and don't also forget I was chairman of 90 board.
How
and
has that
90 has been at the forefront of pushing the transparency debate.
Has it continued after he was MD of the NNPC?
Has what continued?
The publishing
They
of the
still
reports.
publish. They still publish, but it's not just, I'm not talking about publishing, I'm talking
You're
about...
talking about accountability
exactly, I'm talking about transparency.
The thing right now is this,
interestingly, Malkwe,
yes.
and I believe that we're in for a more positive trajectory now. Mele Kyari, who has just been appointed as GMD, used to be very active with us in 90. He was one of the key representatives of NNPC in 90. So I would demand of Mele, as chairman of Governors Forum, and encourage him to become, to those tools that he has, he knows about these issues, to become more transparent. That way, there will be, in my view, a lot more resources that would enable the country to drop the, if you like, obsession with subsidies.
Well,
there's no country, there's no way in the world where you don't have subsidy in one form or another. You need to know that. It's just what you do with managing it and ensuring that it really responds to the need. It's not, you're not just lining the pockets of a few people.
The thing is, I don't think that there are many countries in the world where, you know, the country produces a primary resource and imports the finished product. I don't think there are many countries in the world where that happens. And I think for a lot of Nigerians, that remains the question.
That's a different argument that you've gone into a different line.
It's not a different line. It's still within the conversation of fuel subsidy removal, because for a lot of Nigerians, the question is, we produce this crude oil, we export the crude oil, and then we bring it back, the refined products, and then we say that we have subsidized.
We ought not to be doing that. But the reality that we're confronted with is that our refineries are not working in optimum capacity. We have a big private sector driven refinery.
I don't want to say 4 years of the APC, and we're still talking about these issues, but you know, it's what it is.
It's not 4 years of the APC. It's about the decay that preceded that.
I'm not going
and you're not going to make this transformation in one fell swoop.
Well, the thing is,
I know the president is very concerned about this. He wants the refineries to work like yesterday, and every effort, I had my old colleague, Ibe Kachiku, talk about this, that one of his own regrets was that the refineries are not back on stream fully.
Let's go to this last one. I'm just going to ask you, as a closing question, is your job in any way, as NGF Chairman, going to affect your job as Governor of Ekiti State? Because it did seem to have affected the tenure of your predecessor, Governor Yari of Zamfara State, while he was in office. His state took a toll, or would I say his tenure as, you know, governor, chairman of Nigeria Governors Forum, took a toll on his state.
Well, my primary responsibility, Malkwe, is governor of Ekiti State. I would not be chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum if I had not been elected as the governor of Ekiti State. So I am still focusing all of my attention on being governor of Ekiti State. But there's no question that as chairman of the Governors Forum, I have more responsibilities now to attend to other things, to engage the federal government on behalf of my colleagues, and to engage institutions of state and intervene on a range of issues. However, the way I've dealt with that is that I have a very capable deputy governor who steps in the breach when I'm not around. I have responsible heads of MDAs as commissioners who know clearly what their mandate is and they fulfill their mandate. I'm not running an authoritarian state in which if the governor is not there, everything shuts down. My state is not like that.
Well, I'm sure that, I mean, when you say that, you definitely indict other states.
I'm not indicting anybody. I'm just saying I am not.
You know, you do know that there are many states like that.
I am not running an authoritarian state. And I spend a great deal more time in my state than outside my state. Well,
Kayode Fayemi, thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you for having me on Hard Copy.
Well, that's the program tonight. Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Governor of Ekiti State and Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, has been our guest. But we have to thank you for engaging with our platforms. Shola Aikoroje deserves special mention for her very engaging mail. Do keep those mails and tweets coming and engage with our handle on Twitter as well. And let's move the conversation forward. Many thanks for watching. I'm Mao Ogun Yusuf. Good night.